Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to mix things up a little bit. We are going to be sitting down and doing what they call the style of a fireside chat. Don't worry, we are not actually going to light anything on fire, except maybe an entrepreneurial zeal or an angel investor type zeal. Given the speaker that we have coming up, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to have a quick 15-minute, very fast and punchy exchange with somebody who has the experience both as an entrepreneur and as an angel investor. He's invested in over 55 startups in their early stages, many of which have gone on to become very, very successful. He was the UK, United Kingdom, Angel Investor of the Year in 2015. He is the chair of the Cambridge Angels. You've seen him on stage. He's back again. Please welcome Mr. Peter Kelly to come and have a little sit down with me. Peter, come on up. All right, I'm going to sit over here where I can see my countdown clock. Very good. Sounds good. And we've got just a quick, one of the things that we want to look at here is also talking about kind of what's changed in the industry, but also corporate venture as an exit strategy and kind of some of the changes that are happening in the relationship between angel investors and venture capital, because change is in the air. But I think to kind of give a little bit of context, Peter, we need to get started with a little bit of your history as an entrepreneur and as an angel investor, and maybe a little bit about the different, some of the fundamental differences in the experiences you've had as an investor dealing in both of those milieus, an angel investor and dealing with a kind of corporate venture capital.
Yeah, okay. Is this on? No, it's not on. Oh, it is on. Hi, thanks, Andrew, and thanks, Baybars, if you're in the room. Yeah, so my background, which is actually on page something or other of the Angel Investor magazine that you've got in front of you. I won't go through in any detail, but I had about 40 years and I worked as 50,000 hours of entrepreneurial activity, setting up 10 businesses in property, development and tech. And then I swapped over to angel investing about 10 years ago, and I've had about 10 or 12,000 hours of doing that. Ooh. And wow. Which is quite a lot. I mean, they say if you pick up a violin within 10,000 hours, you can play it quite well. And I suspect I've got to the point where I know something well. I still make lots of mistakes, of course. So I got involved about 10 years ago in angel investing, had an early exit, which was probably the worst thing that could happen. It got me totally excited about it. It was a positive exit. And then I moved on to join a group called the Cambridge Angels that gave me lots of deal flow, etc. I also, about 6 years ago, helped an engineering company in Cambridge, 100 years old, 5,000 people, 2 billion turnover, to set up a corporate investing arm, a sort of corporate venture. Somewhat different from the other ones. I don't know if there are any corporate ventures in the room, but it's very small amounts of money. But because of that, I've got to know a whole lot about corporate venturing, met many of the ones from Intel, from Samsung, from BMW, etc. over the years.
So the source of the money was a corporate setting, but the amounts that they were investing were very much like an angel investment.
Absolutely correct. So there wasn't necessarily any strategy there, apart from learning about ecosystems. It was primarily to invest partly for financial return, partly to help the Cambridge UK ecosystem, and partly to have some fun, actually.
Oh, really?
This is unusual, isn't it, for a corporate to have fun? But the total, bear in mind, the balance sheet of this company is about £1/3 billion, and the total investors less than 6 million. It's still 6 million that could be invested in something else, of course. Right. The finance director still wants to make sure it was invested wisely, if possible, which is very difficult in early stage.
So there's a number of different motivators there. When people talk about angel investors, fun is something that I think people understand for angel investors, right? But you don't hear about that from corporate venture capital. I mean,
that's exactly right. And I struggle. I remember the first time standing in front of an audience with about 200 corporate venturers mentioning the word altruistic. Altruistic means doing stuff for charitable reasons. And they went, oh, what on earth is that all about? This is somewhat different. So although it is off a corporate balance sheet, it isn't a typical corporate venturing arm.
Okay, oh, that's interesting. So how have you seen angel investing changing? Like, you've invested in 55 different ventures, and of course, I'm sure your own style has changed as you gained experience, but what do you see changing in the industry?
Yeah, so first of all, my style has changed a lot, though it's stabilized the last 2 years, and I'm very open about what I've invested in, what's failed and what hasn't. So I have a website, petercowley.org. It's got all the failures on there, it's got the successes, it's got my interpretation of the reasons for failure. and it's got 16 rules for investment. I get about 1,000 business plans a year, most of which have been filtered through those rules. Thank goodness, otherwise I'd have 3,000.
And do you filter through those rules, or do you have people
No, I
who
have
do that
somebody who will, at some point, a guy called Tom, who works for me full time, who does that. So he handles the early. I'll pick them out and think, oh, this is exciting. And of course, I still spend a lot of time with entrepreneurs because I'm learning from that process as well.
Right.
But yes, what has happened now? Obviously, my knowledge is primarily UK focused. UK suddenly in the last 5 years being an entrepreneur has been as positive to one's grandmother, say, or certainly to one's parents, as being a lawyer or working in a bank or something. Okay. So that it's suddenly become something that's acceptable to do as an alternative to a standard career. Probably because standard careers don't exist any longer. I was in Japan 3 years ago lecturing, and they all have careers that are 40 years long. I said, just think about having 2 or 3 careers in your lifetime. Anyway.
Oh, that's interesting. So people don't see you as just kind of playing around with your money anymore. It's seen as a proper...
Exactly. Well, that's that's right. You mean as an entrepreneur
it's
there?
It's respectable, or to be an angel investor as well.
So, and the ecosystem's much better. The people who've been serial entrepreneurs, either with failure or not, they're both backable because they've learned things. A lot more cash around for the reasons that were explained once or twice earlier on due to our tax incentives and advantages as an angel in the UK. But more importantly, there's a whole... It's meant that, in fact, last year, the numbers were mentioned by Peter earlier on, we've had 600,000 companies formed in the UK last year, which is a huge number.
600,000?
Yeah. It's about the same number per head as the US, but we had about 10,000 invested by angels, either through crowdfunding platforms or by human angels. So, yeah, things have changed. It's become very much more active. But, and this is a huge but, it doesn't mean necessarily there are any more good opportunities out there. Because I don't know how many people in the audience are angels. In the end, you don't back market opportunities, tech necessarily, you back people. Right. And are there any more better people out there? Probably not. Probably not. I mean, there are to some extent because of 2 reasons. One, because more have come out of the woodwork because they're not going into banking or something. And secondly, because some have been through an entrepreneurial journey and have succeeded, excellent, or failed, not so bad. At least they've experienced it and learned that. Yep. So there will be more around, but there's nothing like the volume that you would expect, bearing in mind the number of startups.
That's interesting. Now, I know you just came from the Brexit panel. Yes. We've also seen, the United States getting visas and things like that are being difficult. Some places are easier to get into than others. When you talk about the volume of talent that is available in the UK, in terms of policies, what is the I'm going to segue a little bit into Brexit, even though people aren't here. But do you see that places, maybe like the United States, that are limiting the access of human capital to those jurisdictions, or maybe Britain after Brexit, are they going to be at a disadvantage to places that are more open?
Absolutely, because these people are coming from places where you can't be entrepreneurial. People coming from Turkey, coming from Croatia, coming from Kosovo, where it's actually joining an entrepreneurial team. To be an entrepreneur or early stage employee is possible in these places like the UK and the US. And if that's restricted, unless those people are going to be stifled in their early stage. Right. And that stifling, or rather that limitation, is looking pretty likely. If you look at what's happening over in the States with Trump and his protectionism, what might happen with Brexit, what's likely to happen with Brexit, we are going to be limiting. And in the UK, same as probably the States and many other countries, we haven't trained enough STEM, that's technology, engineering, mathematics graduates, for the requirement of the early stage environment.
Okay. So sounds good. So are you, or it doesn't sound good, sounds tough actually. So immigration and access to countries' visa, that's the type of policy that makes a place more attractive or presents more opportunities for angel investors. What other policies make it easier for you as an angel investor to pull the trigger on taking a risk on a new startup?
Well, unlike many angels in the UK, although I do use the tax advantages, I definitely don't make decisions based on that.
Okay.
There's a lot of almost industrial scale tax planning in the UK, pushing valuations up because of people using the tax. No, I come back down to not policy. We do use policies, of course, whether it's early, help for angels, or it's what we have R&D tax credits, research and development tax credits. There's a number of other policies around which are shared by many other countries. It's the team. It's the team that you're backing. That's what pulls the trigger, is having the right people in front of you, getting to know them and backing them.
Right. Okay.
But that's not answering your question quite what you wanted, I don't
Well,
think.
yeah. What's a good policy? I mean, in terms of people, I guess immigration policy affects the team you're able to put together. As you said, you're not too fussed about things like tax policy.
I'm not personally, but I think it has helped dramatically. It actually goes back a long way in the UK, back into the 80s,
Right.
when the government decided North Sea oil finishing, manufacturing disappearing, partly due to Maggie Thatcher and due to globalization, and then we need to do something else. So let's become a knowledge economy, and somebody had the bright idea of getting startups, which we'd had, getting them motivated by, getting the investment capital available. Now, it isn't just the capital, it's smart capital that makes a big difference as well, and that takes time. That takes cycles and cycles of entrepreneurialism.
Okay, and that's for the angel investors. For the corporation that you were working with that set up its own fund, was there a change in policy, whether it was taxes or regulation, that made them more willing to put aside a little bit of their capital to try their hand at angel level of investing, but through a corporation? Or did they just go for it?
No, funnily enough, not. There was a tax policy similar to our EIS for corporates,
Right.
and it was very poorly taken up.
Right.
So it ran for 6 or 7 years, I think 220 million over those 6 or 7 years, and there was already about 70 or 80 deals in that time. So corporates did not use their tax advantages.
Really?
No.
Okay.
This might be because it wasn't spread widely enough, they didn't know enough about it, it might have been too complicated, there's all kinds of reasons why policies don't get adopted. So that isn't the case, no.
Right.
What's happening, certainly with the one I'm involved with, is because there are lots of opportunities in Cambridge. If you look at other corporates, the same reason that I said on the panel earlier on, it's because of lack of innovation, all the various things we talked about before.
Is there one policy that you would like to see a government adopt in your jurisdiction where you are, or that you think would work anywhere else in the world, or something that currently exists you'd like to see removed because it's an impediment to you investing?
There's no policy, I'm not actually an ideas man wherever I am in life, believe it or not, and there's no policy I can think of that would help improve things, but there is something that is an impediment to early stage investing, and I know this will go out onto the internet, and I'm often saying this, that the valuations of companies in the UK has risen very rapidly because the source of capital, early stage capital, is a bit too much. So if there is something called CDIS, which gives 50% tax relief immediately on investment and then offset if it fails, and no capital gains on exit. That is actually pushing valuations up, and that probably should be eased back somehow.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, that's quite interesting. I've never heard somebody complain that they were getting too many
Too
tax
much tax,
breaks.
exactly.
My countdown clock is flashing. I'll leave with a very quick story about governments providing perverse incentives for investment. In the early 1980s, Canada, where I'm from, became known as the world center of B movies. The worst movies you have ever seen. They were absolutely horrible. And the reason for that was the government created a tax incentive that if you invested in a movie and it lost money, you would actually be able, the tax offsets were so big, you could put them against your entire income. Every doctor and dentist in the country was investing in movies that had as their mandate to lose money. You had to lose money, and hundreds of these movies got produced in Canada, and the intention was for the movie to be a bomb and to lose money. And so for a little while, government policy promoted investment in the worst movies in the world, something to be proud of. Good. So ladies and gentlemen, I'm finishing on that story because what I'm hearing is that the government, in the UK in particular, it's at the point now where the government policies aren't the main thing. It's still about the kind of team you can put together. Open immigration's probably good for that. Anything else, Peter, you'd like to add?
What in terms of, yeah, people are often asking, how can we emulate the UK? And the answer really is start a few years ago. It takes time, you know. In fact, people say, how can we emulate Cambridge in the UK? And we just say start 30 years ago. You cannot do that. It takes a very long time to build up the ecosystem, build up people like me, you, and help. It's not just the money. It's smart money that makes all the difference. All right. Peter Crowley, thank you very much for joining us up on stage today. Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, Peter Crowley, UK Angel Investor of the Year for 2014, 2015. Thank you for joining us.